Welcome to Man in America, a voice of reason in a world gone mad. I'm your host, Seth Holhouse. A recent timeline of events happened which honestly has the power to drastically change the course of this country. These events are, to be simplified, a YouTube citizen journalist named Nick Shirley exposed massive levels of fraud in the Somali daycares in Minnesota. Now, his video of exposing this fraud has gotten over 100 million views. Very significant. And what he has done, though, is that he has helped a lot of Americans realize that a large amount of taxpayer money is actually being stolen, not just by the corrupt politicians, but by people, foreign individuals, and also Americans, but a lot of foreigners coming in this country, finding loopholes in the system, exploiting those loopholes, and literally stealing tens of millions, hundreds of millions, and billions of dollars from the American people in our tax money. Now, what's happened, though, is as people start to calculate and see the scale of this fraud, people started asking a very sober question. If such a large chunk of our taxpayer money is actually being mishandled and misused, and it's getting funneled into fraudulent activities that are also then getting funneled back into politicians' pockets, why am I paying my taxes? Why am I contributing to this fraudulent system? Because in America, we have this idea that if you work hard and you participate in the social contract of being honest, having a good business, working hard and getting ahead, that you can succeed. It's the American dream. But what happens when that dream no longer works? What happens when the people that are actually achieving the American dream of independence, being able to retire at whatever age they want to and have generational wealth, what happens when that's being achieved through stealing and cheating and actually through stealing the taxpayer money? And a lot of Americans have been asking this question. So what we've seen happen over the course of the last week or two is you're seeing a viral movement of people saying, I'm done paying federal taxes. Now, this show is not going to be legal advice. It's not tax advice. Do your own research. I'm not advising you to take a particular stance. I'm just presenting the information to you in a way that helps you make sense of it so you can make whatever decisions are good for you, not necessarily for a corrupt federal government. So this is really, really significant because it's not just some little grassroots things and some alternative right accounts saying, hey, we're not going to do this. Literally, Marjorie Taylor Greene, even Elon Musk are bringing attention to this issue, which is a very, very significant issue because if you look at the methods that have been used to enslave the American people and to keep us under such stress and tension so that we'll accept whatever the politicians give us because we're just so tired. A lot of that system, a lot of those chains are tied into the taxation of the people, which hasn't always been like that in this country. In 1913, that changed pretty drastically, which we'll be talking about in today's show. And so joining me is my good friend, Todd Callender. He's an attorney, very, very smart guy. He actually does a lot of international business, understands insurance and tax exceptionally well. He's an attorney. I forget which specific area he studied, but he's a smart guy. And so we're going to be talking about the implications of what's happening. How does this shape the future of America? What happens if a good chunk of Americans just say, I'm opting out of the system? Now, we also know that President Trump has talked about ending federal income tax. I mean, he's talked openly. I'll play one of the clips in today's show about this. So this is a pretty big shift in where things are going. And there's actually a lot of excitement in this because it's a movement that I feel of people that are reclaiming sovereignty. And they're saying, look, I'm done feeding this beast of a system. I'm done. And actually, if you look at what's often caused massive corrupt systems to fail, it's when the people collectively say, we're going to stop supporting that system. So pretty significant stuff going on. which I think you're going to really enjoy. Honestly, it's like I just finished the interview with Todd, and it's one of the best conversations I've had in some time. It's really, really inspiring, actually. Now, before we jump in, one thing I do want to hit on is if you're looking at how we've been enslaved, it has been through this fiat currency. It has been through the inflation of our currency, the taxation of our currency. And this is why I'm a big believer in doing what you can to keep your assets outside of that currency. Not to mention that there's a lot of indicators that the currency is approaching this hyperinflation stage where our dollar is worth less and less and less. And that's reflective. If you look at the price of precious metals, that's an indicator that the dollar is rapidly losing its value because the systems that they have used to suppress the prices of silver and gold are breaking. And so if you've been following what's happening with silver as an example, the past couple of days, it was well over $80 an ounce. This time last year, I think it was around $25 or $30 an ounce. Now, I've been recommending for a long time now, hey, if you have a little money, put it into some precious metals. Put it into some precious metals, not because it's as an investment, like, oh, you're going to get a huge return. It's about securing yourself and having a safety net that's outside this dollar fiat system, because we know that fiat currencies never live forever. They always collapse. They always die. There's a life cycle to a fiat currency. And there's a lot of people, myself included, think that the American dollar as a fiat currency is reaching the end of that cycle. And so that's why I look at this metal here, silver, gold as well, but silver right now, for a lot of reasons, I recommend more than gold as one of the most important safety nets that you can have, not to mention the investment opportunity, which, again, do your own research, isn't investment advice, but even a key Bank of America analyst came out, I think in the past couple of days, saying that he thinks that silver could go up to $390 an ounce by the end of the year. And a lot of experts I'm following are saying it could easily surpass $100, $200 an ounce in 2026. Right now, it's at current price, it is, I'll pull it up. Here you go. It's at $76 an ounce, right? So again, yeah, it's high, but I think it has much more room to go up higher. So if you've been on the fence, if you've been thinking maybe it's time to invest in some silver, maybe you should put a little bit of your 401k into it. Honestly, I think there's never a better time than now. I mean, I wish I could have gone back and bought a lot more at $20 an ounce, but I just bought some more at $71 an ounce. So if you're looking for a company to help you with that, there's no company I'd recommend more than Noble Gold. Even though it's Noble Gold, they specialize in silver and gold, precious metals in general. Colin Plume, owner's a good friend of mine, solid guy. It's an honest business. So whether you want to just buy some silver directly, have it sent to you to your doorstep, or if you want to work with them on being able to move some of your the assets you have in a 401k or an IRA, if you want to move that money into precious metals instead of sitting in stocks or bonds or whatever, they have ways of doing that allow you to not to pay all the taxes and penalties. So again, do your own research and everything, but my recommendation to you and my own family is that this right now in history, I want to have my wealth in things that I can hold in my hand. I don't want my wealth sitting in some market that's controlled by the elites, like the stock market or crypto market, which I don't trust. Personally, I just don't trust it. I want to have my money in something I can hold. And so if you're looking for a company that you can trust and you can work with, that's Noble Gold. The website is goldwithseth.com. I'll put that link in the description below, or just give them a call. Phone number is 877-646-5347. So, all right, let's go ahead and dive into this discussion with Todd Callender. I think you're going to like it. And if you like it, make sure you share. Make sure you hit that thumbs up. If you're watching on Rumble, thank you for supporting a free speech platform. And just enjoy the show. I guarantee by the end of it, you're going to have a smile on your face. And if you're not, let me know in the comments, and I'll weep as I read your sad comments. So, Mr. Todd Callender, it's so good to see you. I always enjoy your discussions. This is the first discussion that we're having this year, and we've got some exciting things to talk about. So thank you for being here. As I said, I'm just overjoyed when we get to sit down together and just talk about what's happening.
Yeah, me too. Fireside chat without the fire. Glad to be here, Seth. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, judging by your background, I think that a fireside chat would quickly get a little uncomfortable. So maybe an oceanside chat for you might be a little better.
Well, I was thinking more bonfire, but yeah, we can still do that.
There we go. So the main thing that I want to talk about today is tax and what's happening with the tax revolt, the Somali kind of issue that's blown up in Minnesota, which is now being exposed in Ohio, and things happening in California, and just the bigger picture. But I want to start with, I've got one little chart here. I want to pull this up just to frame this discussion. This is off of Twitter, kind of Arthur McWaters. He says, let me get this straight. In 1913, 0 American families paid income tax. In 2025, every family paid income tax. Well, I guess the ones that filed and whatnot. And about 2/3 of it just covered fraud. He says, we have become a tax farm for politicians to enrich themselves and anyone who they can import to vote from them. So here, this right here is showing the percent of households filing an income tax return. And it's kind of wild because there are a lot of things that we do in our life that we think that's just how it is, right? We're just, that's how it's always been. But you go back in time and no, that's not how it's always been. And if you think about the amount of our money that gets taxed, it's not just you pay your income tax. I mean, think about it, right? So say I go and I make, $100, right? That initially gets taxed, income, state, obviously property taxes, school taxes, all those taxes. I then go buy something with what's left of that. I go buy something and I'm going to pay tax on the sale of that thing, on the purchase. Right. I might have it. If I'm going to say I want to resell it, they're going to tax me on reselling it, and say I have some money left, and then say I want to then gift that, or say I pass away and that becomes part of my estate. There's an estate tax. So it's taxed as it passes to my children. And I don't know the exact number, but it seems like if you add up all of those taxes, at the end of the day, maybe we get 20%, which is actually ours. Obviously, they say, income tax is only X amount, but once you run it through the entire system of taxes, they are stealing so much money from us. What are your thoughts on that, Todd?
Well, it's bad when there's such a thing as a surtax, which is a tax on a tax. Yeah. And at this very moment in time, Canada's top tier taxation is 97% on income. 97%. So 30 plus years ago, I was a young lawyer working in Poland, undoing the Soviet model economy. The Russians had left, and they left behind a 94% tax rate, which is to say that Canada is more communist, more Soviet than the freaking Soviets were. But we're not far off. And there is a giant NGO called the OECD, the Organization for Economic Cooperative Development, which is a global tax net, whereby most people don't know that your bankers, amongst others, have been reporting everything financial about you into this giant OECD tax matrix, where everything you own is reported and now tracked, such that it's not just a function of filing your returns. If you don't file your returns, they'll file them for you, or certainly tax you as though you had filed them. So it's out of control. It's no longer us paying money for government goods and services. It's actually slaves paying homage to the monarchs that control us.
Exactly. Well, and we haven't even talked about inflation, because I think it was, actually, let me see. Let me see. I think that there was if I remember correctly, there was a quote from, is it Lenin? I think it was. Let me see if I can find it really quickly here. That he had said, actually he said just upon a quick search here, the way to crush the bourgeois is to grind them between the millstones of taxation and inflation. And also noting how governments use inflation to, quote, secretly and unobservedly confiscate the prosperity of their citizens. And so, I mean, if you look at it, I think this is one of the key ways that we've been enslaved. And that's a lot of what we're trying to do here, is like, through these conversations and these discussions and research, is to figure out how is it they've actually put us in these chains, and how can we undo those chains, right?
Yeah, well, with the aiding and abetting of people in government and people in positions that make decisions to the detriment of us, vis-a-vis 1913 with the Income Tax Act.
Exactly. But what's interesting, and this is what I'm really excited to hear your thoughts on, is that the Somali fraud issue, which I think most people that aren't just completely under a rock have seen, has blown up, and people are realizing that there is an insane amount of money in our country, that our tax money is actually going just to pay fraud. And I think I have another chart here. Let's see.
As though Doge wasn't bad enough. USAID, the waste is mind-boggling.
Exactly. So here, okay, so here, let me see. I got a few different bits of information. And someone here said, okay, so this Peter Onge said, if you cut 1.5 trillion in fraud, you could exempt all income tax up to $200,000. And so there's a chart here that's saying, looking at the cumulative income tax revenue by income bracket. And again, the same guy, Arthur McWater, says, this is shocking. The U.S. collects 2.4 trillion in income tax, but spends 1.5 trillion on fraud. Now, I don't know exactly where the 1.5 trillion number has come from. So I'm assuming that, you know, this is a viral post that got millions of views, that people were vetting this. But again, do your own research. But again, he's saying if we didn't have to pay for the fraud, only 900 billion would need to be collected. This means anyone with less than 500,000 in income could pay literally $0 in income tax. Here's the key point: we don't need to raise taxes; we need to cut fraud. And so this is, I mean, this is a pretty harsh blow to people that are already experiencing the struggle of living in America in 2026, and how difficult it is financially for a lot of American families to then realize that a lot of the money that is being pulled out of their paycheck every month is actually just going towards fraud. And that fraud is going in the pockets of governments and NGOs. And
well, Seth, government is a fraud. Okay, so what are your tax dollars doing for you? People don't even understand the simplest part of this. Money's deducted from your paycheck, and you think, well, at least I'm getting some services, fire, school, whatever, some governments, maybe even healthcare out of your taxes. They don't understand your taxes don't go to any of those. Your taxes only go to pay the interest on a loan that our government took out from the bankers. So all of the money is going to the IMF, World Bank, Bank for International Settlements to pay interest on the debt. That's it. Your taxes aren't going to pay for any of the services. It's a debt model economy. So if you were to simply cut out the bankers who are not only collecting all this money, the interest on it, but they're also the ones creating inflation. They're the ones printing money out of thin air, which is what gives rise to inflation, but particularly when it's not tied to anything of value, gold or land or even oil. That's all gone now. It's just a bunch of printing presses and them fooling us into thinking we're getting consideration for the taxes paid, that there's a quid pro quo. There is none. There's none. I challenge your viewers to sit here and think and say, what am I getting? What am I actually getting out of the government in return for my tax revenues? And they can't answer that question because it doesn't exist. What we're getting is fraud. We're getting fraud out of this. So if you look at it, it's really a criminal enterprise because you have a silent partner that takes the vast majority of the money that you earn. They don't do anything to help you earn it. And if you don't pay it at the point of a gun, they're going to take it, or they're going to take your stuff, or they will take your liberty. In what way is that a representative government?
Exactly. Well, one thing that came to mind, you mentioned that, what are we getting for it? So my wife is from Australia. Australia, I think most people know Australia is a, closer to what you'd consider a socialist country, right? Very heavy taxation and how it's run. But it's interesting because when she came here and when her family has visited, we've talked about, the taxation, they're blown away by some of the things that we're paying taxes on, the amount of taxes we're paying. But over there, what my wife has told me, she says, look, yeah, the taxes are pretty high. I mean, it feels like it's about equal to America, but over in Australia, the streets are well maintained. The cities everything's very beautiful looking. You don't have this, like you go to most major cities here and they're falling apart. The roads are falling apart. But also there you get healthcare. So you're covered as part of what your taxes pay for are you get, in essence, free healthcare. And we also know that now healthcare, the cost of healthcare is skyrocketing in America. And we know that the healthcare industry is making a killing off of people. And so it's like we have the really heavy taxation, but there's like nothing to show for it, actually, except for a bunch of Somali daycares.
So I guess you could get daycare. To answer my question, you could go get daycare
Exactly.
from the Somali immigrants who don't speak English. Yeah, good.
Exactly. So I want to pull up, because you're kind of in talking about, okay, what is taxation, right? So there's an article on this website, the TFTC. It says taxation is a humiliation ritual. And I think this is really important. It says, you're mad as hell. Are you going to do anything about it? So Marty's Bent. So this is a post from Marty Bent, who is actually the author of this, who's based out of Texas. It says taxation is a humiliation ritual. Work hard to get paid in a currency that is continually debased. Pay exorbitant taxes on those wages and watch them get handed to foreigners who were ushered in the country for votes that are used to tax you more. And I'll read a few paragraphs of this, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. He says, this has been an objectively illuminating, enraging, and humiliating week for the American taxpayer. A 23-year-old YouTube journalist by the name of Nick Shirley dropped an investigative report on the child daycare and medical transportation fraud taking place in Minneapolis, Minnesota, by the insurgent Somali community, which has been greatly supported by Democratic leadership in the state and at the federal level. I'm sure most of you have seen the story already and understand the details. If not, you need to get from under the rock once in a while. He's using the same kind of thinking there. So he says, instead of focusing on the details of the story, let's explore the fact that taxation in the United States is nothing more than a humiliation ritual. We are told that paying taxes is our civic duty to make sure that we can have roads, pay for health care, veteran services, the military, and a litany of other feel-good services. In reality, it seems our tax dollars are being funneled to immigrants and the politicians who brought them in for votes via low-effort fraud schemes that are grotesquely offensive to the sensibilities of every hardworking American who has grown up to believe they are holding up their end of the social contract that comes with living in this country. I won't pretend like I've ever fully believed in the legitimacy or the validity of this social contract. If you've been reading this rag for long enough, you understand that I loathe the federal government. However, I didn't believe it was this bad. Grotesquely offensive. I think that's the only way to describe what has been laid bare over the last week. What's worse is that for some reason or another, Nick's video was the straw that broke the camel's back. This exact fraud has been reported on multiple times since at least 2018. I really like how he frames it. It's a humiliation ritual.
Yeah, it is. It absolutely is. And it's not small money. That's, I guess, the part of the humiliation part is, how is it that we didn't know this? I think one of these people was collecting $100 million or something in that neighborhood for their daycare centers, or four of them or so. That's huge money. In what way? Does $100 million justify daycare? It's absurd, and that is humiliating. The fact that we didn't do anything about it since 2018 is by itself humiliating. It's really tragic.
It is, but I think also that, when he says you're mad as hell, are you going to do anything about it? I think that that's what's happening now. Is I think that for some reason the Somali thing, it's like it like burst the seal that was keeping the pressure in. And so now what we're seeing is actually a very viral kind of idea of a tax revolt, which I really want to dig into with you. I've got two more short videos I want to show. One is, this is a video that Elon Musk shared. So again, think about this, thinking about the reach of Elon Musk. So this video got 12 million views. Let's just listen to this really quick, because it's a minute 37. This is some American girl on TikTok. But I have one more video after this to show that the American people are hitting a breaking point. So let's give her a listen.
Yeah.
I want to talk about how the average American is starting to feel as major corruption is being exposed, especially now with the case in Minnesota and the daycare fraud. This is not just about money being stolen anymore. It's about a growing feeling that being a good citizen, being a hardworking person, paying your taxes may not be worth it. People are starting to feel stupid. They think, well, I'm here, I'm playing by the rules, I am working hard, I'm providing for my family, I'm doing the hard work, and I'm the idiot. You see the memes online and we laugh, like, oh, me on my way to work, thinking that I should have just opened a daycare center in Minnesota and made millions. And again, it is funny, but it's also deeply sad. Because the next thing is, why am I even doing this? And that's the part that no one wants to talk about, because this kind of feeling shapes culture. I come from Brazil, as you know, and in Brazil we have this thing we call the Brazilian way, which is the idea that there's always a shortcut, there's always a loophole, a way to take advantage of a situation. And people think it comes out of nowhere. Oh, it's just the Brazilian way of living. No, this comes from years of Brazilian people being robbed and nothing being done with the thieves. So we now think that survival means cheating the system before it cheats you. Eventually, people stop believing that being honest is rewarded. When a society teaches its citizens that being honest makes you a loser, well, that's really dangerous. You don't just lose money, you lose trust, you lose dignity, you lose the culture that holds it all together. And once that's gone, it's really hard to get back.
Boy, is she right. That's absolutely brilliant. Boy, she nailed it. How does the government regain trust? And it's not just our government; it's all governments. You look at Europe is falling apart. Funny enough, I was just writing to a French lawyer about tax in France, and those people are ready for a revolution. The last one was mighty bloody. I think they beheaded people for 7 years. That's where this goes. When people lose faith and trust in governance, they will find a way to the exclusion of those holding power. How about Ceausescu, right? In Romania, clung to power, took everything from people, was speaking in the morning, and by that afternoon, he was being executed with his wife. It happens like that. That's the danger, and she's got it exactly right.
I also think that she made an important point about how this changes the culture. Because
Yeah.
you and I were talking before we started recording about what is America and what America stands for. And America has always been perceived as being the land of opportunity. If you come and you work hard and you're an honest person, that you can rise above whatever social caste or whatever you are on the ladder, and that you can climb up that ladder through a shared and understood and respected set of principles of just hard work, ingenuity, etc. But what happens to a culture when that doesn't exist anymore? When people no longer believe that being honest and working hard is the way to succeed, but where they also believe that actually doing that means that you're a fool. How does that shape a country?
Well, it shapes the destruction of it. And you got it precisely right. Believe. Governance only works when you actually believe in it as a system. And when you don't, right, that's when you have effectively piracy. So when we see our selected officials, that were taken out of a bartending job, they become a representative on the federal level and go from $0 to 30 million in 4 years. It's obvious that they are helping themselves, right, to the exclusion of you. So it becomes so obvious to us all that our government is an illusion of choice, right? That we're voting for the paradigm of one party or the other to the exclusion of any other choice. Both sides are always controlled. Both sides yield the same result. So it must necessarily end in the same way, which is that the entirety of the government structure, the apparatus, is discounted. And that's where we are. That's where people are at this point. Like, it's hardly any different than Bud Light having the transvestite as a spokesperson. People didn't want it, so they used their dollars and said, "We're not buying Bud Light." It nearly bankrupted the company. The exact same scenario exists here, and I've been watching it for many years with the state nationals. People say, "I don't want to be a citizen of the United States anymore. I am and was a citizen of this state where I live." And it's got a constitution. It is a sovereign. And I don't mind paying state taxes because at least I'm getting something for it. but they actually resigned their U.S. citizenship in favor of their state citizenship. And I know people that have gotten passports. They stopped paying federal income tax, and it's not a few people that I know that have done this. It's a lot. At the time when I was really looking into the legal justification for it, it was 25 million Americans that opted out of the federal taxation system. Imagine if that becomes contagious as a result of this Somali fraud.
It's a really good point. And I know this is something that I've explored a lot, just to kind of limit my discussion on it publicly. But I know that I've had Ann Vandersteel on talking about this and how there's people that have just said, I'm done. I'm opting out. That there are loopholes in the legality of it that you can exploit or you can benefit from, where you basically just say that I'm not going to pay into this system. And I think that, say 5 or 10 years ago, you might look at it and say, look, going back to the original Constitution, everything, it's like from the very get-go, it was unconstitutional to bring in this income tax. But then when you look at how these taxes are being used now, it's all, I'm seeing a lot of people actually, I'm seeing a lot of discussion as we'll kind of discuss more of this kind of national tax strike. I'm seeing a lot of people that are saying, I can no longer be complicit in this criminal behavior, because that's a different perspective. It's one thing to say, look, it's unconstitutional to take this much of my money, and it's not, I'm a sovereign individual. My rights come from God. I don't agree with this. That's one angle that a lot of people take. But then the other angle that I'm seeing is people literally saying, the money that they're taking from me is being used to commit illegal activities, right? To commit crime, fraud, any number of things. And so it's a moral dilemma to say, is it the righteous thing for me to do, to refuse to give money to this an enterprise that is using it for criminal purposes? It's a very valid point.
Yeah, it is a valid point. And that goes to the whole point of what is the legitimacy of government in any event. When you have governors, for sake of argument, I've seen the evidence, involved with cartels, partaking in trafficking of people or narcotics or other such things, illegal things. And you could use Maduro as an example, right? That was state-sanctioned drug running, amongst other things. Then what is the validity of the government itself? In what way is that valid? Simply because somebody is official, because they were appointed, because they wear a sash across their chest? Does that make it official? And when you go down this road, what you come to understand is what I was saying a minute ago, that governance generally is an illusion. It's really up to us. And while it is true that we need people to make national decisions and state decisions and protect our society, it all begins with a simple act of marking out a territory, putting your stakes down and saying, we are going to jointly defend and jointly exploit this. And when it goes beyond that is when you see the sovereignty start to disappear. When government goes into business, it's over. And what do we see now, thanks to Obama, by the way? Public-private partnerships is the definition of fascism. Prior to him, business was business. Government didn't invest in business. It might award contracts, but it wasn't an equity participant. Now we see people in the CDC, the FDA, that own patents on drugs that are being forced on people, and they are economically rewarded for forcing the drugs on people. That is the definition of fascism, and that's where we are now. So every time I hear this stupid phrase, public-private partnership, I want to puke, because that's the very system of governance I helped undo when the Soviets left Poland more than 30 years ago. So if you want to see what that looks like, look at the Soviet Union. Everything falling down, infrastructure crap, people drinking all day, take themselves out of the misery. In fact, in the military in Russia, they were given a liter of vodka every day per person, just to keep them pacified. That's where we're headed.
Man, it's an important discussion to have, because as you and I have often discussed, this all comes down to our own free will. And it comes down to whether we are complicit, whether we will continue to participate, whether you wear a mask, whether it's you follow Fauci's medical advice, or whether it's you participating in the tax system. These are still as much as they want, just like the mandates, right? Under Biden, they had these mandates. Oh, you must keep your job. If you want to keep your job, you got to get the latest booster, right?
Right.
No one, as far as I know, no one was ever forced into that. No one was ever held down under duress and had this thing shoved into their arm, right? It was still, well, maybe the military, right? Perhaps it was happening, but in terms of like the general public, right? It was still our own choice.
That was the plan,
right?
You're
right.
Their plan.
Yes.
Use of force was authorized
yes.
in the military, and we saw their plans. And the plan was to use militaries to force people to take the shots. But you're right. I'm only aware of 2 instances. One was a prisoner, and one was a service member, where they were actually held down and forced to take the shots.
That makes sense. Okay, but in general, though, it's what this goes back to is it's up to we the people. As much as we feel like there's this big system, it's really up to the collective.
They need us.
People. Exactly.
They need us. There is no productivity. If we don't participate, the whole thing falls apart. So the ramifications of simply not paying your taxes, when it becomes a large number of people, that's really bad. But what it represents is more dangerous. And that is, we're done with this facade. We see it for what it is, and we don't respect it. We're no longer afraid of it because there's nothing to lose. You've taken everything I've got. I'll put my productivity over here doing something different because I'm not paying you to defraud me. That's the natural conclusion that comes next.
It is. And that's what's happening. So you mentioned what happened if more and more people catch on to the kind of state national movement, right? But what we're also seeing is this very, very viral tax revolt, this idea of a tax revolt. And so I want to share some stuff on that. So there's one video, this guy, Andy Frisella, this clip went very viral. And I saw a lot of these discussions happening over the course of the past week or so. So I'm going to play this. It's about a minute and a half. Just to hear this, because this is, again, these are important words. And I think he might swear a few times. I might go back in and afterwards and kind of edit them out to make it still PG, but let's give him a listen.
Things could be so different, but we have a group of entitled rulers, quote unquote, that believe that they rule over us, and they take half of our entire lives. And then when you die, they take 60% of what you accumulated and have already paid taxes on. We are not free. There is no difference between what we do here and what they do in North Korea, where they tell them, oh, you're free, we're the greatest, we're the best, but they can't see what the fuck is going on anywhere. Okay, most Americans have never been out of the country.
No.
And if they have, it's to fucking Mexico or Canada.
Don't count.
Okay, they've never been
off this continent.
Exactly,
No.
bro.
No, they haven't.
This is all bullshit. This is all bullshit. There's a reason that the wealthiest people in the world are moving to Dubai and places in the Far East. There's a reason for it. Taxation was never meant to be a permanent thing anyway.
No.
And it just went more and more and more and more. Dude, 20-year-old kids in 1776 literally killed motherfuckers over 3% tax.
On T.
Yeah, and what are we doing?
Yeah. Tax me harder, daddy.
Yeah. Oh, well, I don't know. I don't want to fucking disrupt. I don't want to rock the boat. Motherfucker, if you don't rock the boat, there ain't going to be no boat.
Yeah, but if I don't pay taxes, Andy, how will the Somalians start their daycares and take care of all those Somali kids?
Every American should highly consider organizing and not paying fucking tax, period.
So,
wow.
Yeah, I will have to clip that up a little bit, make it PG. But
it was a little sporty.
But this is what's interesting is I started seeing this going around, people talking on Twitter about this idea of a tax revolt. And I saw Marjorie Taylor Greene, she's talking about it, and she's a big account. Elon Musk sharing videos about this, and you can see it. Even there's a Fox News host talking about it, how people are going to just stop paying taxes, and so you could see this momentum building. Similar to, it's like the tea act, right? We're tossing tea into the river, right? It's into the oceon. So, but I want to pull something else up.
But I'll
let you. I want to hear your response to him before I keep moving on.
Yeah, I've seen this before in my life, in my work. I've seen the death of nations, and it happens. But there's a really important thing to bear in mind here, and that is, and he alludes to it. If you're paying property tax, you don't own your property, because if you don't pay the tax, somebody else is going to take it. So again, it goes back to this illusion of ownership. And again, back when I was Poland, I used to skydive, and I found this drop zone in Poland that was run by a bunch of former Spetsnaz soldiers from Russia. Former, because the Russians had just left, and we were riding up in the airplane, and they were singing this song about being free. It was a Russian military song. Freedom from the motherland guarantees our freedom, free this, free that. And it was such a joke that one of the guys said, "We got to stop doing this. We're not going to sing this song anymore," because the lie perpetuated throughout, generations in Russia. They fooled these people into thinking they're free when in no such way they were. So what happened? These guys quit. Russia had to compete for citizens, as you see Vladimir Putin trying to get people to come back. How do you do that? You have to compete for your tax base. That's why they're importing people, creating a new tax base. Because if you ignore your people, they will leave. And that's exactly what happened with these Russians I used to jump with. They left. And that's what happens as a nation dies. The same thing in Venezuela. When I was working there 20 years ago, the country nationalized the oil companies. And what happens? The intellectual capital left the country because they couldn't use their brains to support this communist nonsense. So they left. That's what happens, and this is dangerous. This is the part I want to get across. This is precisely the plan, ordo ab cao, right? There is a new system of governance waiting, and it's AI-driven. There's no humans involved, and the owners of this world can't wait for us to stop paying taxes and destroy our own government. They're waiting like this, and they've been prepared for decades. Because as soon as we do that, the collapse happens, and we're here with our solution for you. No more fraud. It's AI. It's blockchain. Nobody can steal because we already know where all the assets are, and they do. So we have to be very careful about disenfranchising ourselves from the government completely, because if we do that, we run a huge risk that the next system is going to be worse than this one.
It's a good point you made, Todd. And something, when you mentioned in Venezuela, that what happened is that the intellectual, the intelligent people, they just left. And it reminded me of one of my favorite all-time books.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if you read Atlas Shrugged.
Yeah, of course.
It's a big read. I highly, highly recommend people read this book, because this is America right now. It's a brilliant book describing basically a communist takeover of a country through corrupted government, heavy taxation, through public-private partnership, and eventually like the seizing of intellectual capital, et cetera. And what she outlines in here is basically that's the outcome, is that all the intelligent people, they basically say, look, we're done. They opt out. They find their own little place to escape to, and they kind of sit and just watch the country burn. And that's what happens, is that when you stop incentivizing creativity and hard work and ingenuity, the people that have those skills will take them elsewhere. And it's a dangerous thing. It's a dangerous thing to happen, because if it continues, as that young woman said in the video that Elon shared, the culture is really at risk of turning into something that can become a downward spiral, which is not good.
Yeah, no, it is not good. It's exactly where we're headed. So the question then becomes, Seth, what are we going to do about it? And I think it goes back to the notion that all things are local. So one of the things that I do like, and I love Anne, by the way, she's a good friend and a leader. And the point is that she's no longer supporting the federal government. And a lot of these people that we talk about, state, national, or however you want to describe it, because there's a bunch of different names to describe the same thing. People that have opted out of the federal system have not opted out of their state system. They are simply making that choice. When I say people will leave, that's what we're talking about. They're simply saying, this is my sovereign, this state, I'm paying those taxes because I live here and I actually get something out of it. But people really struggle to understand what it is they're getting out of the federal system, other than a military, which a lot of people don't agree with anyway, and what it is that they're doing and being the world policeman. So that's the risk we run. Our federal government, people have to remember, is comprised of 50 states. It's the 10th Amendment to our Constitution. And without those, there is no federal government. And that's the other danger in this. And so the point I want to make is this. It starts local. You take over everything locally with your people, because in my view, it's not really possible to do that on a federal level anyway. It's a rigged game. You're not getting in unless you're chosen to get in or approved to get in. But it starts at the school board. It really does. It starts at your city. It starts at your town hall. And if you take back those organs of power, the states have the right to not participate. And I think that's the way things actually have to unfold, so that we can't have a system of AI governance rolled in and forcing us to adopt it. Look at Tennessee as a great example. They said no more chemtrails. We don't care if this is a federal program. Don't go over our airspace. Other states have followed suit. And while it hasn't stopped it entirely, it has mitigated it. But that's the right way to go in all of this. Let's not wholesale abandon governance. It's really a function of making sure that government's working for us.
And that's a really important part too, because what's being discussed here is a national federal income tax, Revolt, right? It's going back to saying, look, we're aligning ourselves with really what it means to be a constitutional republic, and how the Constitution established that the power is really at the ground up. It's in your local sheriff, it's at the local level, it's at the state level, and the federal government should be this small government just to protect the borders of the nation and to do the core things that you need a federal government for. But it's now grown into this massive behemoth that, so people are saying, okay, well, let's just cut off its food source, right? Cut off one of its food sources. Yeah. But what's interesting is I saw a lot of questions about this, and here's a guy kind of summarizing what Grok had presented. He said, according to Grok, now again, Grok is just an AI, so, but they're pretty sharp. But according to Grok, if everyone stops paying taxes, the IRS has zero chance of keeping up with it and would go into a total meltdown. Meanwhile, the U.S. government would have to concede defeat and negotiate with the power of the people for tax exemption indefinitely. He continues, just says, this is not rocket science, people. Just ask for your W-4, or if your company's digital, it's very easy. So this is also an interesting point. And everyone should do your own research. I'm not kind of giving you legal advice or anything like that. Trust me. Keep staying free, steering clear of that. But a lot of people are salaried employees, and by law, an employer has to pull your taxes out of your paycheck ahead of time when you give a W-2. And so a lot of people think, okay, how do I get around that? There's a quick little post here I wanted to share. And this guy says, I don't know who needs to hear this, but when you accept a job, is not the only time you can fill out a W-4. You can submit a revised W-4 at any time. On the revised W-4, you can claim enough exemptions to effectively nullify any income tax withholding, or you can simply claim exempt and nullify. The first comment here is interesting. He says, yep, my first paycheck that won't have federal income tax taken out will be next week. I've been taxed since I was 15 years old. 30 years of taxation has come to an end. They can suck it. And you're seeing a lot of support from this. And so this is just an interesting point, just so people know that, for people that are on a W-2, you can't just go to your employer and say, hey, stop pulling my taxes out, because if you're W-2, they have to, but you can actually switch, as far as I understand, again, do your own research, talk to your accountant or whoever, you can switch to a W-4 and you can stop that from happening. So this is how a lot of people that are on W-2s are actually participating in this.
It's the W-4 simply informs your employer that you'll be responsible for your own taxation instead of them doing it. That's all it is. It's a shift of responsibility. And then it's up to you, right, as to what it is you're going to do. You get to argue the toss.
It makes perfect sense. And so I also want to play something here, because this, I think, was back in December. Trump has floated the idea a lot about replacing the IRS with the ERS, right, the External Revenue Service. This is something, okay, it's a little 12-second clip, but I'll play this and we can discuss.
that at some point in the not too distant future, you won't even have income tax to pay because the money we're taking in is so great, it's so enormous that you're not going to have income tax to pay.
So
he's right.
I mean, you can see
our government didn't. Our government never had income tax till 1913 because it made its money on tariffs. So he's probably right. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just saying that. I mean, you can see that this is really in the machine is in motion now, and it's kind of exciting actually. Because it feels like as much as we've done rallies and stop the steal and like in the mandates, which are all really important, this feels like a pretty significant turning point that I hope that more people understand how important it is.
I think so. And let me just add this to your calculus. Prior to President Trump in this term, this is really important to note. The World Economic Forum wasn't just moving forward with globalism by itself. It was using the Organization for Economic and Cooperative Development as the replacement system, the one world regulator. And what Americans don't understand is that system is already in place. They've already harmonized everybody's laws and regulations. They gave themselves independent taxing authority, and they were effectively going to replace nations with themselves. What did President Trump do effectively on his first day of office is he reestablished our nation's sovereignty. He closed the borders and he engaged with immigration and law enforcement, said, all these people came illegally, got to go out. That is called reestablishing your sovereignty. If you're not aware, President Biden, President small p, B is also small, went to Mexico on January 10 of 2023. He wrote the Declaration of North America, which has the effect, the dissolution of our nation. You might as well call it the Articles of Dissolution because that's the legal effect of it, the end of American sovereignty. And he did it as an executive order. Name me one person in our federal government says you don't have the right to dissolve our nation. When you get away, when you open the borders, you are dissolving your sovereignty. And that's what the Declaration of North America did. President Trump came in, and regardless of your opinion about him, the man came in and he reestablished our sovereignty by closing the borders and enforcing immigration and saying, no, this is the United States of America. This is not the North American area. And he renamed the Gulf of Mexico, Gulf of America. He deserves credit for that. If nothing else, he deserves credit for that because he actually saved what we had left of a republic. So I got to give the guy some credit for that. And I also love the way that he's talking. He obviously knows, he's a student of history, and he knows that our entire federal government ran on tariff money prior to income taxes. He's got it right. And it is in fact possible to do that. I would warn you, the whole rest of the world operates on value-added tax, which is every time an American hand touches those goods or services, there's a tax applied. It's a cascading tax. And that's what was in store for all of us until President Trump closed the borders and said, no, this is America. We're not going with it. And what did you see as a result of that? You see other nations doing the same thing. I just got back from Chile, same thing. The Chileans said, we've had enough of this. We're not going with the OECD and the World Economic Forum. We are Chileans first. And I see that now in Brazil. I see that in Argentina, everywhere. Sovereignty is coming back into people's minds and their frame of view. And I'm really glad about that. But I'm telling you, it would not have happened but for President Trump reestablishing our borders.
And it's important to give credit where credit is due. And I know that I was, would have considered myself a, relatively strong MAGA in many ways, believed in a lot of the core principles. And also I think like a lot of people felt pretty let down and thinking, okay, like yes, being mocked for discussing Epstein and these things, it just didn't sit right with me. Yes. And I became pretty critical of what's happening, but I'm still trying to be neutral. I'm trying not to be kind of emotional one way or other, whether it's idol worship or whether it is just doom and gloom pessimism. And giving credit where credit is due, Trump has done some solid things. Even him talking about income tax, like that's a big deal when you understand the role of income tax and how it has controlled people. I mean, even again, they reversed the food pyramid. Right. So we know the standard American diet, which has led to diabetes and obesity, has now been inverted. So you're at the very top is proteins and fats. Right. It's like, yes, of course. Right. There's good things happening. One thing that I think is really important to highlight, which is something that I've been really concerned about, that Trump came out. This made my day. It's the other day, Trump put this out. He said, for a very long time, buying and owning a home was considered the pinnacle of the American dream. It was the reward for working hard and doing the right thing. But now, because of the record high inflation caused by Joe Biden and the Democrats in Congress, that American dream is increasingly out of reach for far too many people, especially younger Americans. It is for that reason and much more that I'm immediately taking steps to ban large institutional investors from buying more single-family homes, and I'll be calling on Congress to codify it. This is also interesting. He says people live in homes, not corporations. I will discuss this topic, including further housing and affordability proposals and more, at my speech in Davos in 2 weeks. So this is like,
love it.
This is pretty incredible, right? That
yes, it is.
He's going to be unveiling this in Davos of all places.
Fabulous.
But if you've been following all the different indicators that lead to the outcome of you'll own nothing and be happy, we know that it's becoming increasingly difficult for the average American family to afford a home. And that's been the staple of security for the American family. And we know that a large reason why the prices have gone up so high is because you have whole neighborhoods being bought up by, what was it, Blackstone, BlackRock, all these giant banks. So him, like, if he legitimately puts an end to that, he has my support on that issue fully. That's an amazing thing to be done for the American people.
I think he has to go a step further, and it may not be a federal job to do it, but what I said remains true. If you have to pay tax to own your property, then you don't own it.
Yeah.
Right? Because if you fail to pay it, somebody else gets to have your property. So just to the point, what you said a minute ago, Klaus Schwab et al. Said, you'll own nothing and be happy. The operative word there is own, right? They don't want you to own. That's the whole point, is when you have pride in ownership, when you have something, your own self-interest or that of your family, you will dedicate time and energy and effort into it. But when it belongs to the state, they don't. And I spent 3 years in Cuba, another communist nation. And when people have nothing of value to trade, do you know what they trade? Information. They narc on each other. So all they're trying to do is stay alive. So ownership becomes really the hallmark of freedom, and he's got that right.
And if you look at all this together, I think there's a lot of good things that are happening, as much as there's a lot of bad stuff going on.
Yeah.
And
we're still here. Seth, we're still here.
We are, right? And it's funny because even my wife had said the other day, because we've been pretty disappointed in a lot of things happening under Trump, especially the FBI, the Charlie Kirk cover-up, Epstein. I mean, there's a whole laundry list of things that have completely eroded my trust in this government. But actually, Kate made a good point, and she goes, you know what, Seth? She's like, I've found a really positive way to feel about President Trump. Actually, I feel pretty settled inside. I was like, what is that? She goes, he has now helped the American people see that the political system is completely broken. And it's like,
it's true.
That's a good point. It's like a lot of people thought Trump's going to get back in. He's going to turn the whole thing on its head. He's going to fix everything. He's going to arrest all the traitors. And, he's out there saying that, Epstein's a Democrat hoax and this. And so I think maybe it's a good thing that a lot of Americans are just like, you know what? I'm done. I'm done with this two-party politics system. I'm going back to my local family. I'm going back to things I can do. It's a really important step, I think, in saving the future of this nation.
It is. And I would add to that, and people have been talking about it for a long time, including Ron Paul, who I really loved, libertarian politician. I think he hated being called a politician, but term limits. If you allow people to establish their positions of power, they will use it and abuse it. But if you can't serve for too long, then that goes away. So while you have term limits for the presidency, why do we not have them everywhere else? Right? That doesn't make any sense to me. And when you look at the breadth and the depth of the kind of fraud, and I have seen it because I got whistleblower clients who have demonstrated it. You've got governors on the take, attorneys general on the take. They've all been there long enough, and they're all pals, and they all do this graft and greed thing together under the protection of officiality. They're officials. You can't do anything about it. Right? That's got to change. The only way to really change it is to ensure that there is new blood routinely and regularly, so they can't actually take control for a longer period of time. So term limits has got to be the key to the resurrection of our government. If it will be resurrected, I don't know. I hope. I pray.
I'm glad you mentioned praying there, because I've come to the conclusion that the only thing that will really save the government is enough American people, I think, getting back to virtue. Like, we have to correct the culture, right? The culture that's been intentionally destroyed by cultural Marxism and corruption and Satan himself. We have to bring back just a shared moral foundation in this country, and respect and unity.
It's funny you say that. Look, so I got to send it to you again. I know I sent it to you before, but if you read the Communist Manifesto, it's titled The Naked Communist. It was read into the congressional record, funny enough, January 10, 1963, 60 years to the day prior to Biden dissolving our nation. There are 45 items in the Naked Communist, how to destroy the United States. And that was read into the congressional record. And it talks about dissolving borders, dissolving oaths of office, dissolving the family, dissolving trust in your government, trust in leadership. Every one of those has been ticked back. So what I'm trying to say to you is that this has been a plan. There you go. This has been a plan for a very long time. And here we are. Every one of those 45 items has been ticked back.
So how about, let me read through a handful of these things, because
Please.
I'm glad that you mentioned this. And actually, I'm going through, I'm re-listening to, there's a book that was put out by the editorial team of the Epoch Times called, actually, I'll find out, I'll pull it up real quick. It's called How the Specter of Communism is Ruling the World. Have you read that one yet?
No, I haven't. I love Epoch Times, but no, I've not read that.
I'll pull it up and I'll show you. I highly, highly, highly recommend it. It's actually, you can get it for free too. They have the whole thing serialized. You can buy the actual book. This is the book itself on the Epoch Times shop. Actually, I'll put a link to it in the description of the show. You can get an audiobook on Audible, etc. But it's called How the Specter of Communism is Ruling Our World. And it's a 3-volume set. Todd, I highly recommend you read it. You'll love it, because it merges morality and the battle of good and evil and the devil and Satan and all these things into the role of communism. And it really makes the point that actually communism, because the entitle, how the specter of communism is ruling our world. It's not how the specter of communism is ruling China and Vietnam and Cuba or Venezuela. It's the world. And it points out that actually the specter, right? So what's the specter of communism? It's this evil entity that's actually ruling America. It's ruling us through heavy taxation, corruption, the corrupt political system, through the ruling elites. It gets into all that stuff. Really, really good book. But I think it's getting back over to the goals. So this was put into congressional record, these goals. So what here?
January 10, 1963, by the way, a few months before they murdered President Kennedy.
Exactly. So he says, it was under these circumstances that Cleon Skousen, a former FBI special agent, turned author and devoted anti-communist, wrote the book The Naked Communist in 1958. In 1961, Skousen added a list to his book entitled The 45 Communist Goals for America. This list is his own and is reprinted below without any changes. And so you're right, this was put into, it says Skousen's list was important enough to be read into the congressional record by Congressman Albert Herlong of Florida on January 10, 1963. So think about this. Okay, these were the goals that he wrote in 1961. Now in 61, think about how different America was.
Yeah.
So, okay. So just kind of looking through a couple of these different, these goals. 3, develop the illusion that total disarmament by the United States would be a demonstration of moral strength. Permit free trade between all nations regardless of communist affiliation and regardless of whether or not items could be used for war. Provide American...
Item 13 is a good one. Look at 13.
13.
I filed a writ quo warranto with the U.S. attorney on this very issue because we found that not a member of the Biden cabinet had a valid oath of office.
There you go.
Eliminate loyalty oaths.
Do away with all loyalty oaths. Yep. 15. Capture one or both of the political parties in the United States. You check that off.
John.
Get control of the schools, use them as transmission belts for socialism and current communist propaganda, soften the curriculum, get control of teachers' associations, put the party line in textbooks. Check. Gain control of all student newspapers. Check. Use student riots to foment public protests against programs or organizations which are under communist attack. Check. Infiltrate the press. Get control of the book review assignments, editorial writing, and policymaking positions. 21. Gain control of key positions in radio, TV, and motion pictures. 22. Continue discrediting American culture by degrading all forms of artistic expression. An American communist cell was told to eliminate all good sculptures from parks and buildings and substitute shapeless, awkward, and meaningless forms.
That explains all the memorials that have been destroyed in the last administration.
And all the stuff that's come up in place of it. These like abominations that they've been erecting. 23, control art critics and directions of art museums. Our plan is to promote ugliness and repulsive, meaningless art. 24, eliminate all laws governing obscenity by calling them censorship and a violation of free speech and free press. This is how they brought in pornography, right? So, we're not going to ban it because that's censorship. 25, break down cultural standards of morality by promoting pornography and obscenity in magazines, motion pictures, radio, and TV. Done. And think about that. Think about in 1961, that would have seemed crazy to think that they're promoting pornography on radio and TV and motion pictures. 26, present homosexuality, degeneracy, and promiscuity as normal, natural, and healthy. Man, 27, infiltrate churches. Replace revealed religion with social religion, discredit the Bible, and emphasize the need for intellectual maturity, which does not need a religious crutch. 28, eliminate prayer or any phrase of religious expression in the schools on the grounds it violates the separation of church and state. Man. 29, discredit the American Constitution by calling it inadequate, old-fashioned, and out of step with modern needs, a hindrance on cooperation between nations on a worldwide basis.
Do you remember Ruth Ginsburg, the Supreme Court justice, said exactly those words? He said, "Oh, we need a replacement. Ours is out of date."
Of course.
From a Supreme Court justice.
Exactly. 30, discredit the American founding fathers. Present them as selfish aristocrats who had no concern for the common man. Gosh, look at this one. You'll love this one. Support any social movement to give centralized control over any part of the culture, education, social agencies, welfare programs, mental health clinics, etc.
Department of Education. How about that one? Exactly what that is.
Exactly. Infiltrate and control the unions, infiltrate and control big business. I mean, it's wild. Even here, discredit the family as an institution, encourage promiscuity and easy divorce. Emphasize the need to raise children away from the negative influence of parents. Attribute prejudices, mental blocks, and retarding of children to suppressive influence of parents. I mean, this is just. And
every one of those.
Every
one of those have been ticked back.
Exactly.
So it was a plan. That's the point. You're looking at the plan. No different than Agenda 21. Shares much of the same content.
Exactly. But it does seem that a lot of Americans, not just Americans, people around the world, are finally waking up to this plan and rejecting it. And so that's, again, that's why we're doing what we're doing. It's why we have these conversations, which I hope that anybody who's made it this far in the conversation, if you're still here with us, with Todd and I, share this with somebody, because this is important information. It really is. And that's the thing is I have tried so hard to make sure that this show is not one where I'm just feeding the left, right, fires, where I'm just kind of blaming things. I think it's really about figuring out what's happened to us. Why are we here? What happened to this country, and how do we get back to what we want it to be? Because there is a path, but it's not an easy one, but we must do it.
Well, it's really up to us. That's what you're saying, and you're so right. It's up to us, and we all have something we can do. I was talking to a gentleman yesterday. He's an author now. Ian Trottier is his name, And he got so disgusted with our government. A special agent from the FBI was a whistleblower. He was involved in the whole Brennan Russia event. They wouldn't do anything with his whistleblower complaints. So he tried to find people to please get this information out. This guy, just a regular guy, businessman, I think he's a contract, took it upon himself to write a book. And not only did he write a book full of citation to prove the case that these gangsters in our government stole the elections and they framed Donald Trump with all kinds of horrible things, Russiagate. But he then took his book and he went around the halls of Congress and he went everywhere he could and he gave away his books. The point I'm trying to make here is that it takes one. It takes one and others will follow. So if people have the courage not only to share this, you have the power to do something. Use your God-given creative brain and figure it out like the guy I spoke with yesterday did. We can all make a difference, every single one of us, but we've got to have the will to fight for our nation, fight for our survival, fight to have our culture back. Seth, the golden age, right? People wanted to come to America because it represented hope, what could be done rather than what has been done. So, man, you got this exactly right.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, this is the beginning of the year, and I find this to be really inspiring because what's most important is that people need to know what they can do. They need to know that if they do something that they can affect change.
Yeah.
Because if you no longer believe that you can even affect change, you give up. And you just kind of swim out past the breakers and watch the world die, right? That's one of my songs growing up, right? And that's the thing, though, is that we have a lot of power in this country. We really
Yes,
do.
we do.
And it's a collective power to build communities, to spread messages like this, to help get more Americans on board with this. Because if we don't, okay, let's show where that leads, which we've talked a lot about. But if we do, we have the ability to, I think, to really course correct where this country is going.
We've got to stop being lazy, Seth. I am so bothered by how many people have abdicated their thinking to AI. How hard is it to understand that if we don't use our brains, our God-given dominion over our lives, somebody's going to do it for us? And in this particular case, it's a machine. Right? How lazy can we be that we can't even go on a search engine or go to a library to look up information? We now have to ask a freaking computer that may or may not give you the right answer. But what I'm trying to say is it's anecdotal as it relates to the bigger question. Do we have the will, right, to stand up for ourselves, to take back our dominion, to live our lives as God's creations, as humans? Or are we going to be consumed by something created by others? Vis-a-vis World Economic Forum, you'll own nothing and be happy. If you want to live in a freaking box and eat crickets and have somebody else do your thinking for you, go that way. But if you want to be a sovereign, if you want to be a human, if you want to have dominion and freedom over your life, you got to earn that. It means doing your own thinking, doing your own work. So stop being lazy, Americans. That's how we got here.
Exactly. It's a fourth turning. It's the fourth turning, right? And right now it's weak men have created a wreck of society, but that's now forging strong men, and that strength is reemerging.
I hope so.
I
bring God back.
Yeah.
That's the other part.
Well, Todd, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for just allowing me to sit and pick your brain and share these thoughts together. And I hope that this discussion can go far and wide and get more people on board and more people to feel inspired and to feel like they have that locus of control, that ability to actually affect change. It's very important.
Yeah. Well, you're important. Seth, thank you for giving me the opportunity to have this conversation, because it is inspiring, and I think you bring a lot to that. And I just love your intro, and I've talked about it a little bit. It's that whole spirit of a freedom, of the pioneer spirit, the golden age Americana, where we had an American culture. And I appreciate you doing that. You're representative of that culture. So thanks for having me, allowing me the opportunity to have this chat.
Well, thank you again. Yeah, absolutely, Todd. Well, Until next time, take care and God bless you and God